Hey guys, and welcome to episode 3 of Cozy Spooky Readings. I'm going to be doing something a little bit different this episode. I'm only reading one story, but it's going to be a long one. So grab some hot cocoa, get your blanket, get all cozy, tuck in your fellow ghost, and let's jump into this story. Pickled Brains. Once a year, we have a family gathering to eat pickled brains. The first time I remember doing it was in preschool. My mother let me choose a pretty dress and we went to my grandma's beach house. I thought it was a nice little trip because I never considered how weird what we did actually was. "Come on, Cassie, eat it," my mom said softly, and I complied. It was gray on the outside and pinkish on the inside, squishy and sour. I didn't like it, but I also didn't cry like some other kids. "Good girl," my dad praised me as we watched my cousin Dylan sobbing. I then asked what this strange food was. They told me it was pickled brains. Ever since I was a little kid, I knew pretty well what this strange delicacy was. I just didn't know exactly where it came from. "It will make you grow up healthy and smart, and you only need to eat it once a year," Mom explained. It would be an eternity until the next unpleasant time I had to chew on that thing, so I smiled, pleased with the answer. I remember my cousins around my age or older throwing up after being fed their share of pickled brains, but I never did, despite thinking it was gross. I believed my parents wholeheartedly, and I wanted to be healthy and smart. As an only kid born to older parents, I was always their pride and joy. And we had a pretty good relationship. They were already experienced and wise people when they had me, so it felt like they always knew what to do, and they had so much patience. I was truly thankful for them, especially as I entered my teens. Most of the younger family members felt uncomfortable with the odd tradition, to say the least, and rebelled against their parents, but I never did. To be fair, some of my aunts and uncles were indeed overly strict and annoying. Still, I wouldn't dream of disrespecting them. That's probably the fundamental difference that made my friendship with my cousins fade. When I was 12, my parents sat me down to have the talk. "Cassie, there's something we need to tell you. Something about the pickled brains," my mother prefaced. She was unfazed as always and smiled benevolently. Her graying hair in the temples and the wrinkles accentuated by her smile made her look like an elder angel to my young eyes. Mom was already over 50, and Dad had turned 60 the year I turned 12. "Have you ever wondered where they come from?" Dad asked. I hadn't. I frowned, remembering the time Dolan told me I was such a sheep. "You know how Grandma got sick and died last year?" I nodded. "Well, we removed her brain right after she died, and we're eating part of it this year, and then for some years to come." She said it so naturally that I could do nothing but react naturally too. "Oh," I muttered simply. "It's a very old family tradition to enhance your own brain. You're holding on to your grandmother's wisdom. Isn't that beautiful?" I agreed. It was kind of nice knowing that my ancestors would live on in me. "Did we eat Marcel's brain too?" I inquired. Marcel was an older cousin of mine who died a few years ago when he was 27 in a car accident. Or he wasn't old enough? They shared a look. "We ate it too, all right. When the brain is old, it gives you wisdom, and when the brain is young, mental strength," my dad replied. "We don't have a lot of mental strength since most people who die are old, right?" I asked. They agreed and patted my head. I was smug to be the only younger person who knew about this amazing secret, and I looked at Dylan and the others like they were silly little children. My parents made sure to praise me for being able to keep an important secret. After all, the other kids in the family were too immature to be a part of this. Sarita, my younger cousin, even made the mistake of telling a teacher that her parents gave her brains to eat, which led to a lot of unpleasant questions. But luckily, her parents simply said it was cow's brain. I, on the other hand, always ate my pickled brains without complaining, and I knew better than to tell someone about it. It might sound weird to an outsider, but I lived quite a normal life, except for this thing that I saw as a mere detail. After all, it was only once a year. I had plenty of other experiences to busy myself with, and eating human brains wasn't something that defined me as a person. I lived carelessly, being a good daughter and an even better student. The pickled brains did enhance my mind, and all my teachers told me I had a bright future ahead of me. I was 15 when I realized that there was something else I didn't know about my family. It was Dylan who pointed out something terrifying. Cassie, have you realized one thing? Sometimes beyond the yearly reunions, only the adults would gather, and after that, someone was always hospitalized for a while. It just happened to my brother, Dylan informed me. He turned 25, and a week later, he and my parents went to the beach house without me, and then my brother was in the hospital for a whole month. I wonder what they did there. Why don't you wait until you're older to find out? I asked earnestly. Don't mock me. By the time I'm 25, I'll have escaped this madhouse, he replied, and I chuckled, knowing he would. Despite our differences, Dylan was my best friend in the family, and I was supportive of his choices. Unfortunately, Dylan barely had the time to enjoy his freedom away from our strange practices. He ended up passing 4 years later, before he turned 20. I was devastated. He was my favorite cousin and one of my favorite people in the world, despite the fact that no one seemed to share this opinion. At his funeral, I gave a beautiful eulogy, even more heartfelt than his mother's. At least he died doing what he loved. My mother comforted me. It was true. Dylan was crazy for his bike, and knowing that he died riding it made my heartache a little more bearable. When I became a legal adult, my parents changed. At least in one aspect, they started pestering me to have children. They became strangely pushy about that, brushing off finishing college and enjoying my youth like those were minor, unimportant things, despite the fact that I was a brilliant student. They even promised me to support me, so I didn't have to work or have a husband if I didn't want to. I tried to understand their side. They were getting old and afraid that they'd die before they knew their grandchildren, but I'd be lying if I said that I didn't resent them a little for that. But I didn't give in. I educated myself and got my dream job. I still visit my parents constantly and went to yearly meetings, but after Dylan's death, I started to see the little things that felt wrong about my family, just like he always did. Still, I brushed it off because I loved them, and because I didn't think that eating the pickled brains of my dead relatives once a year was that big of a deal. You have no idea how easy it is to push bizarre things to the back of your mind when you're this used to them. It was when I turned 25 when that all changed. Please don't make plans for tomorrow, my mother asked, after congratulating and pampering me, and let your boyfriend know that you'll be with your family for a while. I should have known that something was off, but it was my mother, the person I have loved and trusted my whole life. She'd never do anything bad to me, but she did. They all did. I don't remember a lot of the meeting per se, but all of the older members of the family were there, just like Dylan's brother said all those years ago. He was there too. Some looked nervous and unsure, but most were really excited about something. My vision was veiled by a mist and my movements were sluggish, despite the fact that I didn't drink alcohol that day because I couldn't. I'm pretty sure they laced my food with something. The only thing I clearly remember was being groggy in a hospital-like room with my parents holding my hand as an older cousin who was a surgeon seemed to be preparing his tools. We love you, Cassie. I know you're confused now, but please remember what a blessed life you've been having. We've been wealthy because of our smarts. Your whole life you knew what and how to do things, and you're already successful, all because of the brains we feed you. It's time you give back. And we promise you that after that, things will be even better, my father added. Everything went black after that. I feel that it took me a long time to wake up again. Still, the two of them were there, holding my hand and looking at me with nothing but devotion in their eyes. Hello, baby girl, my mother muttered softly. Mom knows that you must be confused, but it's time for you to learn the last bit of the family secret. You made me dizzy and then said something ominous, I replied, feeling incredibly hurt and betrayed. She laughed it off. I know how it sounds, but don't worry. Mom would never do anything bad to you. How do you feel? I felt awful. My body was numb and I had a splitting headache. My stomach felt like a crumpled paper bag, but I didn't want to show them how vulnerable I was, so I said I was just a bit dizzy. You're such a strong girl, Dad praised me. They truly seemed to think that there was nothing wrong with whatever they were doing to me. You're getting an extra treat today. Now I felt like a dog. I was so disappointed in them. Go get it, George, my mother told him. She gets to see it for the first time, too. Dad brought a giant jar, easily taller than me, with a huge metallic lid that looked dusty and ancient. It was filled with grimy, disgusting looking liquid inside, with some horrible little chunks floating all over the mucky water. My father was an old man, so it was a wonder how he could carry that thing. We just added a bit of your brain to it, he announced proudly. George, stop ruining the surprise, my mom scolded him. None of the two realized that the sight made me puke inside my mouth, but being on an empty stomach, only bile came out. Cassie, today you grab a hold of the true power of the pickled brains, my mother explained with a serious face. By removing a small bit of your own brain while still alive, you'll get access to the knowledge of everyone this jar has ever contained, and we just did it for you. Congratulations. More than getting wiser and smarter, now you'll specifically know a lot of things that our ancestors knew, as well as all your relatives older than you. Isn't that fantastic? My father added. I didn't think so. I thought it was revolting and incredibly twisted. Still, I didn't have the energy to refuse being fed, so I didn't resist as I watched them open the jar. The old and foul smell that came from it made me retch again. It was clear that, in order to retain all the knowledge of generations, that thing had never been cleaned. They just added more and more. They fed me one repulsive, nauseating bit of human brain. When the family's medical team finally let me go home, I bawled for hours, crying myself to sleep. I woke up to a head full of disturbing knowledges. How my first ancestor, to decide pickling his own brain, had been a slave owner. How his son made a small scientific breakthrough after stealing most of the ideas from his assistant. How my great-grandfather had served the wrong side of the First War. How my grandmother made her husband a successful and rich man by kidnapping and torturing his rivals. I learned over 100 possible ways to make dirty money. I didn't feel smarter or wiser at all, only disgusted at my bloodline of vile cheaters and murderers. I don't know if something went wrong with my surgery or if they simply didn't mind letting me know, but I learned many other things too. How my mother murdered Marcel and then Dylan because she thought the jar needed more mental strength and they were misfits in the family, so no one would miss them. How my parents had 3 children before me, all who died in unfortunate accidents between the ages of 3 to 7, their sappy little brains brimming with strength, a precious addition to the filthy salted juice. How they started pressing me to have children because once again, the jar was filled mostly with old brains, and I knew what I had to do. It's been 3 months since I came back from my brain surgery. As I hold my baby bump of 5 months, knowing that I won't have to sacrifice my daughter for the dark schemes of my parents, I pretend to mourn them. I'm scared of it all, but determined to protect her. The pickled brains taught me very well how to murder and steal. The rest of the family has no idea that I was the one who killed the 2 of them, or that the jar was destroyed. I burned every last piece of it, and I threw their evil brains in the sea. No one but the fishes will eat them. And I'm coming after whoever tries to stop me from letting this horrifying family tradition die. I hope you enjoyed that read as much as I did. A little bit of a twist at the end. That was very fun. Remember to like, comment, and subscribe to the channel if you enjoyed, and follow my socials, which will be posted down below. Love you.